You cannot be here.
That is my lodge.
Not until the association completes its review.
Welcome back to HOA Justice Stories, where power gets questioned, facts come first, and the truth always has the final say.
The drill screamed against my front door before my truck even stopped rolling into the forest clearing. A white-haired woman in a cream vest stood on my porch, installing a brand new deadbolt on the abandoned lodge I had bought 3 weeks earlier. 2 HOA volunteers held a sign beside her that read Community Managed Property. Behind them, 3 pickup trucks blocked the dirt access road, trapping my contractor trailer 50 yards back in the pines. The lodge was mine. The porch was mine. The only gravel road in was mine. And the deed, survey, gate easement, and county parcel file were sitting in the lockbox under my passenger seat. Karen Whitmore had picked the one door she never should have touched. Fresh wood shavings curled down the old cedar door. The smell of hot metal mixed with damp pine and cold morning fog. Birds went silent in the trees. The drill stopped, and the sudden quiet felt worse than the noise. Karen turned slowly, like I had interrupted her on property she owned. She was 59, white, perfectly dressed for a neighborhood board meeting, not a muddy forest road. Khaki pants. Cream quilted vest. Silver hair sprayed into place. A clipboard pressed against her ribs like a badge. "You cannot be here," she said. I looked past her at the new lock plate gleaming on my door. "That is my lodge." She smiled. Not warmly. Not even close. "Not until the association completes its review." The words landed flat in the clearing. Association. Review. Like paperwork could erase a deed. One of the men behind her lifted the HOA sign higher, trying to make it official. Wind moved through the fir branches above us. The old lodge creaked once, deep in its frame. "My name is Nathan Walker. I am 46, white, and I buy neglected rural properties before weather and bad owners finish destroying them. This lodge had been empty for 11 years. Broken windows. Moss on the roof. Black mold in the kitchen wing. A porch soft enough to scare off most buyers. I bought it anyway because the bones were good. Stone chimney. Hand-cut beams. A private spring behind the ridge. The kind of place worth saving if you respect old wood and hard work." Karen clearly respected. "Mather." She stepped down from the porch and handed me a printed notice. The paper was still warm from a laser printer. "Forest Pines HOA has maintained oversight of this structure since abandonment," she said. "You will need written permission before entering." I read the first line. Then the second. No county seal. No parcel number that matched mine. No recorded authority. Just bold language and fake confidence. A small detail caught my eye near the bottom. The address was wrong by 1 digit. 1 digit can destroy an entire claim. I folded the notice and slid it into my jacket pocket. Karen watched my hands. "That document stays with us," she said. "No, it does not." Her smile vanished. Behind her, one volunteer shifted his boots in the mud. The other looked toward the trucks blocking the road. They were beginning to understand this was not a harmless bored errand anymore. My contractor trailer sat stranded behind them. My permits were scheduled for inspection that afternoon. Their lock could delay work. Their trucks could block access. Their sign could make neighbors believe the lodge belonged to the HOA. That changed the scale of everything. I walked back to my truck and opened the passenger door. The lockbox clicked under my key. Karen called after me, louder now, telling me not to escalate. I pulled out the deed folder, the county survey, and the access road map. The forest went quiet again. Then I saw the faded map under her clipboard. The faded map disappeared beneath Karen's clipboard the moment she realized I had seen it. Her hand moved fast. Too fast. The motion lasted less than a second, but it changed the entire conversation. Wind pushed through the pines and rattled the branches overhead. The 2 volunteers exchanged a look. Neither of them seemed eager to stand beside her anymore. I held my survey map open across the hood of my truck. The paper snapped softly in the cold air. Karen stepped closer and lowered her voice. That document is irrelevant. I looked at her clipboard. Then why hide it? She did not answer. That silence said more than any explanation could. One of the volunteers shifted his weight again. The fresh HOA sign suddenly looked less convincing. I compared the survey lines on my map with the terrain around us. The gravel road, the ridge, the creek bed behind the lodge. Everything matched perfectly. Then I glanced at the faded corner sticking out beneath Karen's paperwork. I caught part of a boundary line. It did not match the sign she had just installed. Not even close. A small detail, but details matter. Especially in property disputes. Karen pointed toward the lodge. The association has managed this structure for years. The old cedar porch groaned behind her. A loose shutter tapped against the wall. The place looked abandoned, but not managed. There was no maintenance crew. No recent repairs. No evidence of care. Just weather and neglect. Who approved the lock change? I asked. The board. Which board member signed it? Another pause. The forest seemed to lean closer. Karen glanced at the volunteers before answering. That information is internal. Internal. Another word people use when they do not want to provide proof. I walked toward the new lock. Fresh metal reflected the gray morning light. The screws still carried tiny curls of aluminum from the drill bit. Whoever installed it had finished only minutes before I arrived. A white sticker remained on the side of the deadbolt. They had not even removed the packaging residue yet. One volunteer quietly stepped away from the porch. He suddenly found the trees more interesting than the conversation. Karen noticed. Her jaw tightened. Something was slipping. Then I heard another vehicle approaching through the woods. Tires rolled slowly over gravel. A dark green pickup emerged around the bend and stopped near the blocked road. An older man climbed out. Heavy flannel jacket. Gray beard. Mud on his boots. He looked at the new lock. Then at the HOA sign. Then at Karen. Nobody spoke for a moment. The man removed his cap. You finally did it, he said. Karen folded her arms. This does not concern you, Walter. Walter ignored her completely. His eyes stayed on the faded map beneath the clipboard. A strange expression crossed his face. Recognition. Not surprise. Recognition. He knew that map. The realization hit me immediately. He had seen it before. Maybe years ago. Maybe decades ago. Karen knew it too. For the first time all morning, she looked worried. Walter took a slow breath and stared at the lodge. Then he said something that made every person there go quiet. That map was supposed to disappear. Walter's words hung in the cold air long after he stopped speaking. Nobody moved. Even the wind seemed to pause among the pines. Karen's grip tightened around the clipboard. The faded map disappeared completely beneath her papers. Walter stepped closer to the porch. Gravel crunched beneath his boots. His eyes stayed fixed on the clipboard. I remember that map, he said quietly. I saw it years ago at a board meeting. Karen shook her head immediately. You are mistaken. Walter did not even look at her. That caught my attention. Most people argued with Karen. Walter simply ignored her. The volunteers exchanged another uneasy glance. One of them quietly removed his hand from the HOA sign. Small detail. Important detail. Confidence was draining from the group. I closed the deed folder and leaned against my truck. What kind of map was it? I asked. Walter looked toward the lodge. The old building stood silent beneath the towering trees. Morning light filtered through the branches and painted long shadows across the clearing. A boundary map, he said. An old one. Karen cut in quickly. That document has nothing to do with this property. Too fast. Too defensive. Walter finally turned toward her. Then why was the board discussing it? Nobody answered. The silence stretched. Somewhere deeper in the forest, a woodpecker hammered against a dead tree. The sharp tapping echoed through the clearing. Karen lowered her clipboard slightly. For a second I caught another glimpse of the faded paper beneath it. Thick black survey lines crossed yellowed parchment. The map looked decades older than anything else she carried. Then she covered it again. Walter noticed. So did the volunteers. One of them cleared his throat. "Karen, maybe we should head back." She shot him a look that ended the conversation instantly. The man stared at the ground. That reaction told me plenty. Whatever authority Karen usually held inside the neighborhood did not work as well out here. Not when questions started appearing. I walked toward the porch steps. Nobody stopped me. The new lock reflected sunlight across the weathered cedar boards. Fresh hardware on a century-old lodge. It looked completely out of place. "Who paid for this?" I asked. Karen folded her arms. "The association." "With whose approval?" Another pause. Another missing answer. The pattern was becoming impossible to ignore. Walter glanced at the trucks blocking the road. "This is bigger than a lock," he muttered. The words were almost lost beneath the trees. But I heard them. Karen heard them too. Her expression changed for an instant. Not anger. Concern. Real concern. Then she recovered. "The board has managed this area for years," she said. "People understand that." Walter laughed once. Not loudly. Just enough. "Not all people." The volunteers looked away again. A cloud passed over the sun. The clearing dimmed. The lodge seemed older suddenly. Larger. Like it was holding secrets inside its walls. Walter took off his glasses and wiped them with a handkerchief. "There used to be another file," he said. "The map was only part of it." Every head turned toward him. Even Karen's. Then Walter looked directly at me. "If that file still exists, it changes everything. If that file still exists, it changes everything." Walter's words settled over the clearing like a fog bank rolling through the trees. Nobody rushed to speak. The old lodge creaked again behind us. A loose gutter clicked softly in the breeze. Karen adjusted her grip on the clipboard. The movement looked small. It was not. She was holding on tighter now. "There is no file," she said. "Not anymore." Walter looked at her for a long moment. "That is not what I heard." The volunteers shifted uneasily. One of them quietly stepped away from the HOA sign and walked toward his truck. Nobody stopped him. The balance in the clearing was changing. I closed the lockbox and set the deed folder on the hood of my truck. Sunlight broke through the clouds and lit the cedar siding of the lodge. The weathered wood glowed amber for a moment. Then the light moved on. Where was the file kept? I asked. Walter rubbed his beard. Years ago, the board stored records in the old ranger station near the South Trail. Karen answered before he could continue. That building was cleaned out. Walter looked directly at her. Cleaned out or emptied? Another silence. Another missing answer. A squirrel darted across the porch rail and disappeared into the trees. Even the forest seemed to notice the tension. I studied Karen's face. She was no longer acting like someone enforcing a routine HOA rule. She was acting like someone protecting information. There is a difference. It shows in the eyes. It shows in the timing of every answer. The volunteers seemed to recognize it too. One of them finally spoke. Karen, nobody mentioned a ranger station. She did not look at him. Because it is irrelevant. Then why keep talking about it? He asked. Karen's expression hardened. The man immediately regretted asking. He looked away. But the question stayed hanging in the air. I glanced toward the blocked road. My contractor trailer still sat trapped behind the pickup trucks. The work crew was scheduled to arrive within hours. Lumber deliveries were already on the calendar. Inspection permits were active. Every delay cost money. Yet somehow the lock no longer felt like the biggest problem. The file did. Walter walked slowly toward the lodge. His boots pressed deep into the damp ground. Back then, he said, People argued about this property all the time. I listened carefully. Karen did not interrupt.
If you're enjoying the story so far, consider subscribing. It helps us keep bringing you real stories where facts matter more than power.
That was new. Some board members wanted control of everything inside the forest boundary. Walter continued. Others said certain parcels were never included. A crow called somewhere beyond the ridge. The sharp sound echoed through the trees. Walter stopped near the porch steps. Then the records stopped appearing. Karen finally moved. She stepped between Walter and the lodge. Not aggressively. Deliberately. Like someone blocking a view. The gesture lasted only a second. It was enough. Walter noticed it. I noticed it. So did the remaining volunteer. The faded map was still hidden beneath her clipboard. The missing file was still unaccounted for. And now, there was an old ranger station sitting somewhere in the woods. The pieces were starting to connect. Then Walter mentioned a name nobody had brought up before. Earl Bennett, he said. The reaction was immediate. Karen's eyes narrowed. The remaining volunteer looked confused. I had never heard the name. Walter noticed. Earl was the board secretary back then, he said. He kept copies of everything. A gust of wind moved through the clearing. Pine needles whispered overhead. Karen shifted her weight and looked toward the road. It was the first time she seemed interested in leaving. Earl moved away years ago, she said. None of this matters. Walter gave a small shake of his head. It mattered enough for people to argue about it for months. The old lodge stood behind them, silent and weathered. Sunlight caught the upper windows for a moment before clouds rolled back in. I watched Karen carefully. Every time Walter spoke, she interrupted. Every time details surfaced, she tried to move the conversation elsewhere. The pattern was becoming impossible to miss. Where did Earl go? I asked. Walter rubbed his beard again. About 40 miles north. Small town near the state line. Karen exhaled sharply. Not quite frustration. Not quite worry. Something in between. One of the pickup truck drivers finally walked over from the roadblock. He looked uncomfortable. Karen, we were told this property belonged to the association. Nobody answered him immediately. The forest felt unusually quiet. Even the birds seemed farther away now. That is what we were told too, the second volunteer added. Karen stared at both men. Neither looked eager to defend her anymore. The fresh lock on the lodge door suddenly felt less important than the story underneath it. I stepped onto the porch and ran my hand across the old cedar railing. The wood felt rough and cool. Years of rain had worn grooves into the grain. This building had survived storms, neglect, and 11 years of abandonment. Yet somehow a missing file had become its biggest mystery. Walter looked toward the ridge beyond the lodge. There was a meeting, he said. Quietly. One I was not supposed to attend. Karen immediately looked away. That told me enough. Walter continued. A map was presented. A file was discussed. Then everything disappeared. The words hung in the air. Nobody challenged them. Nobody denied them. Karen simply stood there holding the clipboard tighter than before. I glanced at the faded corner of the map still hidden beneath her paperwork. It looked older than any document I had seen since buying the property. Old enough to matter. A contractor truck appeared at the far end of the road. My crew had arrived. They stopped behind the blocked trailers and waited. More witnesses. More eyes. Karen noticed them too. The situation was no longer confined to a handful of people in the woods. Every minute made it larger. Walter took a slow breath. Earl never trusted what happened after that meeting, he said. That is why he kept copies. The clearing went silent again. Then he looked directly at me. And I think I know where one of those copies ended up. Walter's voice stayed calm, but every person in the clearing leaned in slightly. Even Karen stopped looking toward the road. The contractor trucks idled quietly beyond the trees. Their engines hummed through the cool forest air. I stepped down from the porch. Pine needles crunched beneath my boots. Where? I asked. Walter glanced toward the southern ridge. My brother bought a storage shed from Earl's estate sale 6 years ago. Karen's expression tightened immediately. That reaction was impossible to miss. Walter noticed it too. Most people thought it was full of junk, he continued. Old tools. Camping gear. Boxes. He paused. One box was different. A breeze pushed through the clearing and carried the scent of damp cedar from the lodge walls. Nobody interrupted him. Karen seemed to be choosing every word carefully now. Estate sale boxes do not prove anything, she said. Walter nodded slowly. Neither does changing locks on property you do not own. The volunteer nearest the sign looked down at the ground. Another contractor had stepped out of his truck. More witnesses. More eyes. The situation was growing larger with every passing minute. I looked toward the blocked access road. The gravel lane curved through the forest before disappearing behind the trees. According to my survey map, that road existed entirely inside the recorded easement attached to my parcel. Nobody from the HOA had authority over it. Yet they were standing on it right now. Another detail. Another problem for Karen. She seemed to realize it. The association was protecting the community, she said. Protecting it from what? I asked. No answer came. Only silence. Walter folded his arms. Earl kept notes, he said. Lots of notes. The old lodge creaked again behind us. A shutter tapped softly against weathered siding. The sound felt strangely important. Like the building itself was listening. Walter continued. He never trusted verbal decisions. If something happened at a meeting, he wrote it down. Karen stared at the clipboard. She was no longer making eye contact with anyone. That alone told the story. Did your brother keep the box? I asked. Walter nodded. Last I heard, it was still sitting in his garage. My contractor foreman finally walked over from the road. He carried a clipboard of permits and inspection schedules. Nathan, he said quietly, county inspection arrives tomorrow morning. I nodded. The timing mattered. Delays would create records. Records created questions. Questions created attention. Karen understood that better than anyone. She looked toward the lodge again. For the first time all morning, she seemed less interested in controlling the property and more interested in controlling the narrative. There is a difference. One concerns land. The other concerns history. The faded map remained hidden beneath her paperwork. The missing file still had not appeared. Now there was a possible box of notes, sitting 40 miles away. The puzzle was getting bigger, not smaller. Walter pulled a folded piece of paper from his jacket pocket. The edges were worn. The paper had been folded many times. He handed it to me. I wrote this address down years ago. I opened it carefully. A name. A street. A town near the state line. Karen saw it from several feet away. Her face lost color for the first time that day. Then she said something that made the entire clearing fall silent. You should not go there. You should not go there. Karen's warning settled over the clearing harder than any argument she had made all morning. Nobody spoke for a second. The contractor engines hummed in the distance. A breeze moved through the pines and carried the smell of damp earth across the property. I folded the address and slipped it into my jacket pocket. Why not? I asked. Karen looked toward the forest instead of at me. Because you are chasing old rumors. Walter let out a quiet laugh. Funny, he said. You seemed worried about those rumors 5 minutes ago. The remaining volunteer stared at Karen. He was no longer trying to defend her. That much was obvious. The fresh lock still hung on my door. The HOA sign still stood beside the road. Yet neither felt like the center of the dispute anymore. The real fight had shifted toward history. Toward records. Toward whatever Earl Bennett had decided to save. Karen stepped closer to me. The association has already reviewed this matter. I glanced at the faded map hidden beneath her clipboard. Then you should not be afraid of more documents. Her jaw tightened. No response. Another missing answer. The pattern continued. A county maintenance truck rolled past the entrance road at that moment. It slowed briefly before continuing toward the main highway. Small detail. Important detail. Public vehicles moved through this area regularly. More witnesses. More attention. Karen understood that. The clearing no longer felt isolated. Walter checked his watch. My brother is usually home after lunch. The statement sounded casual. It was not. Karen immediately shifted her stance. You do not need to involve him. Walter looked directly at her. You keep saying that. The forest fell quiet again. Somewhere behind the lodge, water trickled through the spring that ran down the hillside. I could hear it now. A steady sound. Constant. Unchanging. Unlike every explanation Karen had offered. My contractor foreman walked over carrying permit paperwork. Nathan, do you want us to unload once the road clears? I nodded. As soon as the trucks move? One of the volunteer drivers looked embarrassed. He walked to his pickup without being asked. Moments later, the first truck backed away from the access road. Gravel crackled beneath the tires. Then the second truck moved. The road opened. Nobody argued. Nobody objected. The change felt important. Karen watched it happen without saying a word. Control was slipping away from her one piece at a time. First the sign. Then the volunteers. Now the road. The old lodge seemed different with the lane cleared. More accessible. More legitimate. Like the property itself was beginning to breathe again. Walter looked toward the ridge. Earl always believed somebody would come asking questions someday. I looked at him. Did he ever say why? Walter nodded slowly. Because one meeting never made sense. Karen closed her eyes briefly. Just for a moment. It was the strongest reaction I had seen from her all day. Then she opened them again and forced a smile that reached nowhere near her eyes. You are wasting your time. Walter shook his head. That is exactly what Earl said people would hear. The contractor crew started unloading materials near the lodge. Lumber thumped onto the ground. Tools rattled inside trailers. Real work was finally beginning. Yet my attention stayed on the folded address in my pocket. 40 miles north. A garage. A forgotten box. And possibly the missing piece connecting everything. Then my phone vibrated with a county records notification. I pulled it from my pocket and glanced at the screen. The message had arrived only seconds earlier. A digital archive request I had submitted after buying the lodge had finally been processed. The timing felt almost impossible. I opened the notification while everyone watched. The county database displayed several scanned records connected to the parcel. Most were routine. Surveys. Tax entries. Transfer records. Then one file name caught my attention immediately. Boundary Clarification Memorandum. Walter stepped closer. What year? He asked. I enlarged the document. 1978. Karen looked away before I finished. Reading the title. That reaction told me more than the document itself. I opened the file. The scan quality was poor. Dark lines crossed the page. Water stains covered part of the text. But one section remained perfectly readable. The memorandum referenced the disputed forest tract and specifically excluded several parcels from association authority. My parcel number appeared on the second page. The same parcel number sitting on my deed. The same parcel number attached to the lodge. Nobody spoke. The contractor crew had stopped unloading materials. Even they were listening now. Walter adjusted his glasses and read over my shoulder. There it is, he said quietly. Karen folded her arms. That does not prove anything. But her voice sounded weaker than before. The volunteer nearest the road looked confused. I thought the association owned oversight rights. Walter pointed toward the screen. Apparently not. The old lodge stood behind us beneath the tall pines. Sunlight filtered through moving branches and flashed across the upper windows. For the first time all day, the building no longer looked abandoned. It looked vindicated. I continued reading. Another section referenced an attached exhibit. The exhibit was missing from the county scan. That immediately caught my attention. Missing pages again. Missing records again. The pattern continued. Walter noticed it too. The exhibit might be the map, he said. Karen immediately shook her head. Too quickly. Too automatically. Nobody asked her a question, yet she answered anyway. Another mistake. The remaining volunteer finally removed the HOA sign from the ground. He laid it flat in the bed of his truck without saying a word. Karen watched him do it. She did not stop him. Control continued slipping away. Piece by piece. The contractor foreman smiled for the first time all morning. Looks like we can keep working. I nodded. Hammers began tapping in the background. Lumber moved. Equipment rolled. The restoration was finally underway. Yet my attention remained fixed on the missing exhibit. A document without its attachment. A map hidden beneath a clipboard. A box possibly sitting inside a garage 40 miles away. The pieces were beginning to align. Then another detail appeared near the bottom of the memorandum. A handwritten notation added years later. The skin barely captured it. I enlarged the image. Walter leaned closer. The note referenced a supplemental copy stored outside county archives. Not destroyed. Not removed. Stored elsewhere? Karen saw it at the same moment we did. Her expression changed instantly. She turned toward her truck for the first time all day. Walter looked at me and pointed toward the handwritten note. That location is not the garage. That location is not the garage. Walter pointed at the handwritten notation on my phone screen. The faded ink referenced a supplemental archive stored at the old ranger station near the South Trail. For a moment nobody spoke. The contractor crew had resumed work behind us. Hammers echoed softly across the clearing. The sound felt different now. Productive. Certain. Karen looked toward her truck again. She knew exactly what the note meant. The station was abandoned years ago, she said. Walter nodded. So was this lodge. Another silence followed. The remaining volunteer closed his tailgate and walked over. Are you saying there are still records out there? Walter shrugged. There is one way to find out. The forest seemed brighter than it had that morning. Sunlight filtered through the pines and painted moving patterns across the gravel road. I looked at the lodge. The new lock still sat on the door. The unauthorized sign was gone. The blocked road was open. Yet the real victory had not come from any of those things. It had come from questions. Questions Karen could not answer. Questions the records kept answering for her. I turned back to the county memorandum and read the notation one more time. The reference number matched the missing exhibit. The exhibit matched the disputed boundary discussion. The discussion matched Walter's memory. The pieces finally connected. Karen folded her clipboard shut. The faded map disappeared inside it. This is finished, she said. Nobody agreed. Nobody moved. Even she seemed to realize the words carried no weight anymore. Walter looked at me. The station is about 20 minutes from here. I nodded slowly. Then my contractor foreman stepped onto the porch and called down. Nathan, you should see this. His voice carried across the clearing. I walked toward the lodge. The old boards creaked beneath my boots. Inside the entry hall, dust floated through beams of sunlight coming from the upper windows. The smell of aged cedar filled the room. The foreman pointed toward a built-in cabinet near the stone fireplace. One drawer had been sealed shut by years of paint and swelling wood. During cleanup, it had finally opened. Inside sat a single weathered envelope. No stamp. No mailing label. Just one handwritten line across the front. Forest Boundary Records. I carried it outside. Walter's eyes widened immediately. Karen stopped walking toward her truck. The clearing went quiet again. Carefully, I opened the envelope. Several folded papers rested inside. Survey copies, meeting notes, handwritten signatures. And on the final page was a statement signed decades earlier by multiple board members acknowledging that the lodge parcel remained outside association control. The same conclusion as the county memorandum. The same conclusion as the missing map. The same conclusion Karen had spent all morning trying to avoid. Nobody celebrated. Nobody needed to. The truth was sitting there in black ink. One volunteer shook his head and walked away. Another climbed into his truck. Karen stood motionless beside the road. The forest, the lodge, the records, and the land all told the same story. By afternoon, the new lock was removed. Work resumed. The restoration moved forward. And as Karen finally drove away beneath the pines, Walter looked at the documents and smiled. Earl knew somebody would find them eventually.
If you're enjoying the story so far, consider subscribing. It helps us keep bringing you real stories where facts matter more than power.